summer camps are 81,000. And then we have our social distancing program, which is 500. And then leading from summer into early fall is our Work, Learn, Grow program, which is about 2,000. So over 100,000 spots.
Christina, did you have a follow-up?
Regarding the transfer of school safety officers, can you say what powers, if any, they'll have? Can they still make arrests, and will they be supervised by principals now?
So, Christina, we're going to work through the details with the Department of Education and NYPD. What's important to understand here is in the first year of the transition, there will be a growing leadership function played by school leadership. Officers will be trained by the DOE. There'll be a heavy focus on restorative justice, social emotional learning, deeper dialogue with young people. You know, we believe strongly, this is an administration that has radically reduced the amount of suspension. I believe it's over 40% reduction in suspension. I want to see it keep going down. We've invested a lot in restorative justice, a lot in social emotional learning. I believe strongly in things like peer mediation. And I think school safety will be more effective if it gets more deeply trained in those approaches and in deepening the dialogue with young people and their families. So there's going to be a lot of change of approach in the first year and then the full transition in the second year. There still will, of course, be the ability for NYPD to deal with a situation that is violent or criminal. But the goal here, because that's not the majority, clearly, the vast majority of situations that school safety deals with can be dealt with in a very different manner, is to move more and more to those modern and sort of reform-minded practices and to train the agents in how to do that.
Next, we have Erin from Politico.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. Is there an NYPD hiring freeze in this budget, or is there another class besides the July one that's expected to be hired in this budget?
Yeah, thank you, Erin. So the July class won't exist. That, again, takes 1,163 officers out of the head count. The next class is scheduled for October.
That'll go forward as normal.
Yes.
Am I on here?
Yeah. The answer is yes.
Oh, okay, great. And then my other question was, aside from the NYPD, can you tell us some of the most significant cuts representing, as you mentioned, several $billion since February?
Yeah, I'll start and I'll pass to Melanie Hartzog. I mean, we've had to re-examine every agency and ask them to dig deep and find savings. Some savings clearly came from things that just couldn't happen because of the coronavirus, but others were more programmatic. So we particularly asked Department of Education, it's our biggest budget within the city government is Department of Education. We asked them to dig very deep. And we had to add it up, of course, to billions of dollars. So it took pretty consistent, constant effort. But Melanie, you want to give a couple of highlights?
Sure. So just in total across all of the city agencies, it's about a 1,600 headcount reduction, which totals $100 million annually, roughly, from fiscal years 21 and out. Mayor, as you mentioned, DOE had savings of $400 million over 2 fiscal years. Most of that is tied to remote learning and also taking a hiring freeze on central office functions. And then there are some programmatic impacts. For instance, in the Department for the Aging, we had initially, for senior centers, given that they're not operating, we had taken some savings there of a couple million.
And Erin, we'll get you a more extensive list.
Next, we have Shant from the Daily News.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Mayor, or I should say good afternoon. Just wanted to loop back to some of the specifics on the NYPD budget. I mean, the document I got suggests some of these are not real cuts. I mean, $350 million in overtime, I guess, is subject to debate. But then there are items, without going into too much detail, like fringe costs for school safety officers being transferred out of the police, as well as crossing guards. That's being counted as about 130 million. But I understand that wasn't really, fringe costs aren't part of the NYPD budget in the first place. So I guess to translate this into a question, why add these costs, which may not be real cuts, to say that there's $1 billion cut? And what's the importance of saying there's $1 billion cut happening as opposed to like 750 million or 2 billion?
Sean, look, the most important question here is what are we trying to achieve? And again, if we're talking about the expense side and then talking about the capital side and the impact on people, it's actually 1.5 billion. And the impact on people is going to be very profound. That $500 million going to create youth centers and recreation programs and broadband access for NYCHA residents, particularly young people, is going to have a very lasting impact and a positive impact on their lives. It's pure redistribution to those who need it most. It's also another way of fighting crime. And our police leadership will tell you this. Anytime we're investing in young people, we're helping to fight crime a different way. And that, again, was something I focused on a lot in my State of the City remarks in February. I think the concept of how you find savings is a pure concept. If you are not spending the money on that agency, if money that agency was planning to spend is no longer in their budget, that is savings by any measure. Some is pure headcount reduction, as we said, 1,163 member reduction in headcount. Some is reduction in overtime. That's money that will not be spent. Some is shifting functions to free up officers to do other work so that we can compensate for the reduction in headcount. Changing roles. There's not just a question of money, there's the question of reform. Desire to see roles that can be handled by civilian agencies done that way rather than by the NYPD. The changes in approach to school safety and where school safety will ultimately reside. At the same time, focusing on how we keep kids safe in school. These are all reforms and changes and savings. So we put together a package that responded to the real concerns of the council, and it's always been this way, the back and forth between the council and the executive branch. I was a council member. I respect the council's role. This was something that they thought was crucial to achieve. I said we can achieve it if we can meet three standards, if we can ensure the city will be safe, keep the actual patrol strength, the real patrol strength consistent, and of course, redistribute money to youth programs and social services. We were able to come together and strike that balance.
Yeah, thanks for that. Switching gears a little bit, I think a lot of nonprofits are bracing for pain with council members' discretionary funding being reduced. The complaint I'm kind of hearing is, we provide vital services, we're looking at getting killed. Why not spread the pain elsewhere? Why not do furloughs or pay cuts for city employees? I mean, I gather the city layoffs are off the table, but why not find another way to reduce spending on city salaries? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. It's a fair question, but I just disagree with the assumption. I honor the nonprofits. We've done a lot to invest in nonprofits. They play an extraordinarily important role in this city. And I've put my money where my mouth is for 7 years on this front. But we're in a crisis unprecedented in the history of the city. The last time we were dealing with this many fiscal challenges was the 1970s fiscal crisis. This is going to be a multi-year challenge. And our city workers have been asked to do more and more and more in the midst of this crisis. So no, I'm not turning to city workers and say, take a pay cut when I'm asking them to save lives and keep this city going. We do have to consider layoffs and furloughs, but not layoffs and furloughs so we can take from our public workforce, which is the essence of how we keep the city going, and turn that money over to a nonprofit. That's not the way I see it. I want to give the nonprofits all I can. But I am really concerned, Sean, that not too long from now, October 1st is not a long way away. If we don't get some combination of labor savings, stimulus, borrowing capacity, then we're at a point where 22,000 city workers no longer have their job. And I don't want to see that happen. That would be the single worst thing that could happen for New York City. So deeply respect the nonprofits, but my focus is going to be on keeping city services going and city employees in their jobs.
Next, we have Marcia from CBS.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. My question has to do again with police reform and the fact that a lot of the reform groups are saying that the money that you're taking out of the NYPD budget is basically a gimmick, fiscal sleight of hand, and they're not happy. What do you say to them?
Marcia, look, some people are never happy. And I'm doing the work every day to make sure that we change the city, that we do real reform, that we listen to the honest desire of people all over New York City for more respect, more social justice, but also, and I know you know this, Marcia, the deep desire in our neighborhoods for safety and how we strike that balance. I've talked to people all over New York City, not only in the last few months on this issue, but for years and years. They want safety and they want fairness. They want respect from the NYPD, but they also want to give respect to the NYPD. They want both to happen. So what we're doing here, I think, is profound. When you add it all together, $1.5 billion, money clearly going from the NYPD to youth programs, the way we said. There is a headcount reduction. That's a major, major issue. But we're compensating for it in a smart way to keep patrol strength consistent. It won't be easy. We're asking a lot of the NYPD. We are. It's a time in history where we're asking a lot of everybody and every agency, but in this case, particularly asking a lot of the NYPD. But the NYPD is up to the mission. I don't have a doubt in my mind. They will find a way to be more effective and efficient. They have for years, and they will keep us safe. And we all understand we have to answer the real concerns of this moment, that people want to see our society progress. And I think by doing this work of reform, it actually also helps us heal. So this is a real world way forward. And Marcia, are there going to be critics on all sides? Of course, but I'm convinced this is real change.
So, Mr. Mayor, I actually have another question that's unrelated. I know you announced at the graduation that J-Lo and A-Rod are going to be performing. Are they going to be performing from Florida where they've been hold up, or are they going to be here in New York?
I don't know the exact location, and I think it's more of a keynote remarks than performing. We will get you those details for sure. But I will say to you, again, I think for our young people who are looking for inspiration after an incredibly tough senior year, like none of us has ever been through, this class has been through the hardest. I think to have a woman who came up from the grassroots in the Bronx and has come so far, and amazing, amazing achievements, including the last Super Bowl show. I think it's going to be inspiring for them in particular to hear this daughter of the Bronx, who is a great example of what a New York City public school kid or New York City kid can achieve. So I think people will be really, really happy that both of them are a part of it.
Next, we have Henry from Bloomberg.
Hello, Mr. Mayor. How are you doing?
Good, Henry. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I want to congratulate you for getting this done. It had to be really hard, and you've taken a lot of lumps. I'm going to congratulate you for getting this thing done.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Henry.
But at the same time, you didn't say that A-Rod is really a son of the Bronx. I know you're a Red Sox fan, but,
Henry, I will not count that as a question. I will simply comment. A-Rod, I really respect his achievements, and he's doing a lot now as a business leader as well. But I want to differentiate and give full respect to the daughter of the Bronx as someone who's going to be particularly inspirational to our kids.
All right, so that'll count as a question because I know people hate how long I take. But here's my question, and it goes back to the police spending. The overtime amount that's going to be cut just sounds completely unrealistic. I mean, the cops, I believe, drew about $115 million in overtime just from the last spate of protests in the city. So the amount that you're cutting in overtime is a very nice goal, but how are you going to achieve that?
Yeah, look, we're going to have some exceptional moments, and we're going to have to deal with those unto themselves. What we're talking about is the kind of overtime that is normally relied upon. I had this conversation with the Speaker of the Council, and he and I both believe that, of course, we can do better. and in a big way do better on overtime, because historically we know that agencies still have more to give when it comes to overtime. And this has been an ongoing effort. We've seen progress, but look, we're in a massive fiscal crisis, unprecedented since the 1970s. To turn to any agency and say, you're going to have to do things differently because we just don't have it, is fair. And the NYPD is a very well-managed organization. It's one of the best managed agencies in all of city government, one of the best managed agencies anywhere in the country. So to say to them, guys, you've got to find a way to do better here, it stands to reason. It will be tough. And again, let us pray there's not extraordinary circumstances that affect that number. But I know that they can do a lot. I really do. And we got to set that goal. And by the way, that's to get us to the next step. Henry, I think the cloud hanging over all of this is that this is not the end of the budget discussion. We're going to go through the year ahead, and we are praying revenue does not go down more, but it might. We are praying for help from Washington and Albany. We have no guarantees. I used to think the stimulus was effectively a guarantee that something substantial would happen. I don't believe that anymore. I just have not been shown any evidence. And then we've got the following fiscal year, which we already know we're going to be in a deficit of $5 billion or more. So we better do some things differently if we expect to get through all this.
Last two for today. Next we have Dana from the New York Times.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. Two questions for you. First, can you talk about why it is you decided to cut $65 million from the Fair Fares program?
Yeah, I'll start, and then Melanie Hartzog can join me. I just think the reality of that program, which is a great program, it was an effective, important program. At a period of time, MTA ridership was down to 10% of what it had been. That was a prolonged period of time. I think the whole underlying concept of the program got just disrupted profoundly by the coronavirus, and we're not going to see that turn around in the short term. So, Melanie, you want to add? Melanie?
I would only add, you're exactly right, and it was a right sizing. We worked in partnership with the council, particularly around what the estimate should be. So,
thank you. Go ahead, Dana.
Thanks. And then my second question is, why does it make sense from a, budgetary or policy perspective to implement a hiring freeze citywide, but not at the NYPD, which will still see a new class of officers in October?
Dana, I hope there's not a misunderstanding here. Hiring freezes are an important budgetary tool. When you have a headcount reduction, that's actually even more serious. We're saying very clearly, 1,163 fewer officers because there will not be a July class. That number doesn't get compensated for. That class is going to, and I'm sorry, because again, under normal circumstances, we absolutely would have wanted to have that class. And I know there's a lot of people who are anxiously waiting to join the NYPD, and I'm sorry that circumstance has forced this on us. But you're talking about a headcount reduction, not a hiring freeze, a headcount reduction. And we are able to compensate for that in terms of patrol strength with a variety of other moves, getting people out of desk jobs and onto the street, taking some of the responsibilities. Like I said, the vendor enforcement, the homeless enforcement, a bunch of things will change so that we can make the patrol strength work. Won't be easy. We're asking a lot of the NYPD. But now, we're talking about hiring freezes for agencies across the board. In the case of NYPD, it's a headcount reduction.
Sorry, last question for today, we have Julia from the Post.
Hey, good morning. Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor. I'm wondering if counterterrorism within the NYPD is at all taking any hit in the budget cuts, given that there's an ongoing threat to the city and what the PD has done to stop attacks before.
You'll remember, Julia, that on my watch, we deepened the work of our counterterrorism initiatives. And even though we've been focused on so many other things in the last few months with the coronavirus and so many other challenges, we cannot dismiss the threat of terror. We're still the #1 terror target in America. So we're making sure in this budget that we are protecting our counterterrorism capacity. We have to, in everything we do, figure out how to be as efficient as possible, not only because of the challenges, as I said, in this immediate budget, but what's coming up ahead. And again, if we don't see a stimulus, it's going to be really, really troubling what that's going to mean for this city. But we have to protect the kind of counterterrorism capacity we need for the current circumstance. That is an absolute requirement.
Okay, you said we have to protect it, but will the division or any of the divisions see any cuts whatsoever?
Well, again, the focus here is on what we've done with the class, which is not the same thing as obviously what we do with counterterrorism. Right now, the way we're finding savings is to cancel the July class, to reduce the overtime. That does not directly affect the counterterrorism work. We can get you more detail, but the essential answer is no, it does not undermine our counterterrorism capacity. I think that's 2 questions. Okay, everyone, let me just finish up here. And I want to focus on what has been so much of the discussion in recent weeks. And yeah, of course, it's been about the coronavirus. It's been about disparity and a history of unfairness. It has been about the question of policing. It's been about healthcare. There are so many things that have come together in recent weeks that are deeply, deeply in our mind, and certainly in the mind of the City Council, as we come together on a budget that will make a lot of change in this city. But if there's one thing that has, I think, struck a chord that has been deeply felt by New Yorkers across the board, it is what our young people have gone through. It is that our young people have experienced something that we would never have wished on them, that has been extremely trying for them, even traumatic for a lot of them. And we need to uphold our young people and help them through this moment in history, and they're going to inherit this city. We've got to be there for them. Now, as we all have fought this virus back, and we're not there yet, but we've come a long way, we're in a position to do a lot more for our young people. And this is something the City Council really passionately said. Whatever happens in this budget, we're going to have to shift resources to young people, and that's what we're doing. And I want to be clear. I said it back in February in the State of the City remarks. We need to think differently about how we support young people in this city. We've made a lot of changes before, but we need to go a lot farther. The NYPD is going to refocus on helping young people. The same vision that Commissioner Shea put out months and months ago before the coronavirus. The NYPD engaging young people positively, productively, helping them avoid problems, working with their families. That's going to be a lot of our future. The youth centers that we're now going to open, that we're making a budget priority, taking money from policing, putting it into youth programs. What I said in February rings true now. Our young people need to be reached, not policed, reached. We need to help them. We need to connect with them. We need to figure out what they need to move forward, how to overcome the challenges and traumas, how to nurture them and support them. And we can do that. We must always have safety, and we will in this city. But we're also going to amplify both safety and fairness by reaching our young people more deeply than ever before. And that's what this budget is all about. Thank you, everyone, for continuing to do the amazing work you do every day. I hope you're proud of today's health indicators. It's all because of you, and it's a good, good sign for the future of this city. Thanks very much.